Today on the WEInvested podcast, we have Matthew Sullivan, and he is the founder and CEO of QuantmRE. Matthew, how are you doing today?
Wesley, thank you for having me on. Great to meet you.
Yes, sir. It's great to meet you too. We were catching up a little bit before we started recording, and I found out some interesting facts about you. But I'm not gonna spill the beans just yet. I'm gonna wait a little while.
Okay, I'm
But let's just kind
slightly
of,
worried here. Yes.
yes, sir. Let's just start from the top. Where did you grow up?
Well, when you mentioned this, I thought I don't think I've ever grown up. Actually, if you speak to my wife, then she'll certainly confirm that. But no, I was born. I think one of the great things about you know being an entrepreneur is you never actually have to grow up. You sort of maintain this sense of wide-eyed, childlike wonder at the world. But I was born just outside London, in the United States of England, and moved over here about 8 years ago, and landed in Southern California in Orange County. And about a year ago, we moved to Kaysville, which is this wonderful city just north of Salt Lake City in Utah.
That's awesome. So, how did you like that transition from, London over to the US, over to the States?
Well, I mean, it's just fun. I don't know what it is, but there's something. It's probably because I spent my entire life in the UK, and if you're brought up somewhere, you sort of get used to everything. So over here, still, I remember walking the dog this morning, looking around, thinking, "This is actually quite a cool place. I am here walking my dog in Utah." USA. One of these things I never thought I would do. I'd never planned to move to the US. I'd always been intrigued by it, but I never saw myself actually living here. But it's funny how life takes you on this sort of roller coaster ride, and I just love every minute of it. I love the geography. I love the people. I love the attitude to business. I love the stuff that you can do here, which you just couldn't really do in England, or you could do in England, but it just wouldn't have the same sense of pioneering, as it were.
For sure, for sure. That's awesome. And so, I was referring to some interesting facts that I learned about you, which are, I guess, the top two that stood out to me. The first one being you work with Richard Branson's corporate finance team. And then
Yes.
the second, being that you're a helicopter pilot. So, could you elaborate on those two very unique, very interesting facts?
Well, one thing led to the other, actually. So it was, you're right, we had a small corporate finance, a boutique corporate finance operation in Kensington. So I started out life as a stockbroker, and my boss at the time and his brother spun off a separate company and went out on their own and set up a corporate finance company. And foolishly, they invited me to come along with them. And I was in my sort of mid-20s, late 20s at that point. And we, as part of one of the investments that we made, we bought a majority interest in this balloon company, this hot air balloon company called Lindstrand Balloons, which is based in this wonderful place called Oswestry in Shropshire, which is just beautiful countryside. And Rory had always wanted to fly around the world in a hot air balloon. And he had this sort of stroke of genius one day and said, "Well, we work just down the road from Richard Branson. I'm going to write to him and say, we've got this balloon company. We've got all the designs for this hot air balloon that we think can fly around the world. We'd love you to be the pilot." And so Richard wrote back and said, "Dear Rory, why not?" So we then ended up being the guys that came up with the idea for Richard to fly around the world in a hot air balloon, which what he almost did. And after that point, we got very closely involved with him and all of his corporate finance activities, and we ended up sort of working hand in hand with his corporate finance team. So for a good few years, we were working on really interesting projects out of his sitting room in his house in Holland Park Avenue. And we got invited to all the parties and all the really cool stuff, which looking back was just the most fantastic time, both from a business perspective and just in terms of the sort of people we met. And when we launched the balloon, to give you an example, I was having dinner at the same table of a certain Mr. Buzz Aldrin, and so looking back, I was thinking, God, if only I could sort of go back there, because there were so many people, so many opportunities that I was just walking around permanently like a deer caught in the headlights, you know. But one of the things that we did when we were working with Richards was we came up with this idea to do Virgin helicopters, and we would shuttle people from London Airport or Heathrow Airport or Gatwick into the middle of London to a place called Chelsea, because they had a heliport. And so we set up this company, and one of the things that I did, because I was sort of not in charge of it, but I was that was part of my purview, as it were. I decided that it would be a great opportunity to do the one thing that I dreamt about my entire life, which is to be a helicopter pilot. So I learned to fly at Virgin helicopters out of Wickham Air Park, flying some rather fancy liveried jet rangers and all sorts of other stuff like that. So that was a very interesting time. I haven't flown for a while, but you've reminded me, and so I'm going to go and pretty soon I'm going to go out there and do what I need to do to get back in the air over here.
Yes, sir. No, that's so awesome and very cool. It sounds like you've had just so many unique experiences and legendary experiences, meeting some people who are, historical figures, um globally.
Yeah, they don't return my emails though, sadly. So
Nothing wrong with that. So, let's kind of talk a little bit more about quantum RE. So,
yes.
What is that?
Well, the problem that we solve is to help homeowners access some of the equity in their home without taking on more debt. And you may have heard of the expression house rich and cash poor. And that's certainly the case now, because homes have rocketed up in value. So there are millions, literally, of people who have more than 50% equity in their homes. So on paper, some people are worth millions of dollars, or at least hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the only way that they can access that capital is if they go and borrow money. So even though they've got all of this so-called wealth trapped in their homes, if they want to get their hands on it and be able to spend it, they've got to go to the bank and jump through all the fiery hoops and beg that to be able to borrow some money so they can use something that's already theirs. So what we have is a program that was really created by other people about 10 years ago, which uses many of the same funding structures that you get in corporate finance deals, or in commercial property deals rather, where we allow the homeowner to access the equity through an equity-based agreement as opposed to through a loan. So what that means is our home equity agreements allow homeowners to access up to $500,000 in a cash lump sum, but with no monthly payments, no interest, and no added debt.
Wow, that is a huge opportunity, and a great way for people to get access to capital, you know, if they need it. Um, but before we kind of dive deeper into that, how did you get started in this space? How did you get introduced to home equity contracts?
Well, it's funny. It's like all these things, isn't it? You stumble across these things, um, and I was one of the first things I did when I moved over here was to set up a crowdfunding platform, a real estate crowdfunding company, because the Jobs Act had just been passed, and so for the first time, you could have online platforms where you could. I think the term is generally solicit. In other words, you could advertise real estate deals rather than having to keep them private. And when I was I think I went to a number of these crowdfunding conferences because it was all the rage then. But I, came across one of the speakers who was talking about this type of asset, the ability to tap into home equity, and it was really interesting because of the scale of it. Today, for example, or last year, there was over $23 trillion of equity in residential homes. So in other words, if you take the value of all the residential homes and you strip out the debt, what's left? There's $23 trillion. And there were no ways to access that asset class, which it was sitting there, with a great return profile, just waiting to be tapped. So that was the thing that really got me interested. But it was very much the early days, and so the contracts hadn't really been perfected. There were issues trying to raise capital because there wasn't any interest or monthly payments, and theoretically you may need to wait a long time, like years, for the homeowner to sell before you got your money back. So I sort of shelved it, but it was still nagging away in the back of my mind, thinking, this is something that isn't being done. Really, when the blockchain came along about 4 or 5 years ago, or rather, when I began to understand what the hell the blockchain was, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, I sort of tried to put the two of them together, and we came up with this idea of creating a marketplace where you could trade these equity interests, and that solved the problem of liquidity, and it solved the problem of not having any cash pay.
No, that's genius. And I think, one of the important things that you said when you were kind of explaining what QuantmRE is, you started it off with we solve a problem. And I think that's the heart of entrepreneurship. And that's what really separates a successful business from just, a side hustle is solving a problem for people, recognizing and identifying the problem and finding a way to solve it.
I think you're right. I think that's the biggest problem that I wouldn't say necessarily entrepreneurs, because it affects businesses generally, is that they are a solution in search of a problem. And the thing that really excited me about this was that it was pretty obvious from the outset that there were a lot of people that would really like to do this, because I would have been one of them. Now, in the UK, I'd owned over the years a number of houses as my primary residence. Always wanted to get involved in real estate, but got distracted by other shiny, bright things. But the house, had a number of years where it would appreciate madly. And I was always looking for, what ways are there other than borrowing money to be able to, tap into this. So seeing these or listening to the description of home equity agreements, a few years ago, it just immediately started making me think this is just a great solution for many people. And the more research you do, the more you realize that this is not a niche product. This could be a mass market product that could equal reverse mortgages or home equity lines of credit or cash out refis, that sort of thing. It's not just going to be tucked away in some dusty room somewhere.
For sure, for sure. No, that's awesome. So, what would you say are some of the major differences between a home equity contract and a mortgage?
Well, the biggest difference is it's not a loan. So the way we make our money is by being an investor and not a lender. So if I lend you money, then I'm looking for the return of that capital together with some form of interest payment. And I'm going to secure that loan on something that you own. So if you don't make the payments, then I can come and take that thing that you own and sell it, and then hopefully get back the money I lent you. So that's the basic premise of a loan. And I don't really care as a lender if your house goes up or down in value, because all I care about is that you make those monthly payments. As an investor, we're taking a completely different type of risk. So what we're saying is we think your house is going to go up in value over the next 10, 20, 30 years, which is the duration of the agreement. And what we're going to do is say, here's a lump sum of capital. We don't want you to, we're not lending it to you, but it is an obligation. So, we want it back, but it's not a loan. We're going to invest alongside you in your home, but we're not going to be owners. So we don't have the right to come and knock on your door or sleep in your spare bedroom. When you sell your home, if your house has gone up in value, we'll take a share of that appreciation. So we get paid very differently. The risk is different. If your house doesn't go up, then we run the risk of not getting paid at all. In fact, we could even lose money on the deal. So it's a very different risk profile. Categorically, it's not debt. Now, because it's not debt, that has all sorts of other benefits. For example, it doesn't appear on your credit report as a loan, so you can use it to pay off credit cards or mortgages or other loans that you may have that are costing you too much. And as there are no monthly payments, you haven't got to worry about where you're going to get those few hundred or few $1,000s extra per month. So you can use it to invest in something else because you're moving money out of your equity. Maybe you want to have a down payment on a new home. Maybe you want to diversify out of your home into stocks and bonds, or maybe other types of real estate investments.
For sure. No, that's awesome. So, what are some of the common things that you see homeowners, once they get access to that capital, what are some common things that you see them do with the cash or with the liquidity that they now have?
Well, the biggest use at the moment is paying off existing expensive debt. And the problem is because of a combination of uh, things that have occurred, in particular over the last 18 months during the COVID pandemic. It's much harder now to borrow money from a bank. The credit score that you need has increased, regularly. Your debt to income ratio has become more difficult to achieve, and overall, it's very difficult to borrow money. So a lot of the people that we're working with want to use their equity to pay off debt. In other words, credit cards, pay off mortgages, car loans, the types of loans that are costing them a lot. Because what we're seeing, and I think this is generally accepted to be the case, that it's a lot harder to make ends meet today than it was a couple of years ago or even before that. So what we're seeing is people using this strange rapid appreciation in their homes to be able to solve a real problem, which is to get rid of all of that expensive debt that they've racked up over the recent period. That's the bulk of the applications. But we also have people that want to improve their homes. They've been sitting in a bathroom that's half finished for too long, or a driveway that's been too bumpy for too long and want to get that fixed. We have people that want to diversify and buy into ADUs or sort of granny flats, units that they can rent out. So they're effectively diversifying out of their home equity into other types of investments. So it's a wide range of applications, but the bulk is to pay off debt at the moment.
For sure. That's awesome. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were saying that your platform gives investors the chance to invest in these home equity contracts to provide liquidity for the homeowners.
That's
So,
right. Yeah.
okay, so can anyone become an investor? Is there like a barrier to entry? How
Well,
does that
that's the
process work?
plan. So the plan is to make it accessible to any investor, and we can do that by a particular exemption, which is called Regulation A plus. But there's a process to be able to do that, and in order to um, get our first few deals live and tested, we're using a different exemption, which is Regulation D, which most people are pretty familiar about in the real estate world. And that allows us to raise capital from accredited investors through our platform. So to start with, and this is over the next probably 3 to 6 months, our offering is going to be just to accredited investors only. But then once we've gone through our application process for our Regulation A plus exemption, assuming that all goes according to plan, then hopefully first quarter of next year we'll be able to offer these types of investments to non-accredited investors. And the investments are effectively the ability to take one of these home equity agreements, chop it up into tiny pieces using blockchain technologies, effectively tokenizing that home equity agreement, and then investors can come in and buy tokens that are backed by those real estate assets. So they're not just tokens where you kind of hope that there's some value attached. Your tokens are a cryptographic representation of ownership in that fraction of that home equity agreement. So as the value of the home goes up, the value of your asset backed investment goes up as well. And what our platform's been designed to do is to enable you to sell your investments back to a willing buyer through our marketplace. So it's a two-way transaction as opposed to being just a buy and hold.
No, that's genius. And I think you guys are doing, doing some great things with the new technology that's being made available to us. And when I hear you talking about contracts and things, it kind of just reminds me of Cardano and
Yes.
different cryptocurrencies that allow for these smart contracts to take place. And I
Yeah, I
really
mean, ours we are based on the Algorand protocol. So, but you're absolutely right. There are now contracts in place where there weren't of it. The technology wasn't there a few years ago,
right.
1 or 2 years ago, but now it is, and the smart contracts have been developed to enable securities transactions to take place in a way that actually meets the requirements of the various investment acts. And that's great because that opens up an entirely massive but new marketplace of taking illiquid assets and then using securities laws and technology in combination to unlock those and create liquidity. And so, and again, what we're doing is we are taking what was an untapped, locked $23 trillion marketplace, and by applying these technologies, it looks like trading will begin soon.
Wow, no, and that's so awesome. And I'm personally excited and happy to hear that you guys are using the Algorand technology because heavily invested in
Okay,
Algorand
great. Yeah,
myself.
no,
So
they're great
yes,
guys.
sir.
We're so impressed with their, with the tech and the adoption and so it's great to be part of that ecosystem, to use that rather overused word.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, how do you think that your past experiences help to prepare you for, um, the task that you're taking on today and the business that you're running today? How did that all tie in and help to benefit what you're doing now?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because of all the things that I did over the years, so aside from what we were talking about with Sir Richard, I had I was involved in telecommunications. I had a very early in the internet years, in sort of 98, 99. We had one of the very first internet companies, which was a software as a service. So this combination of finance, telecoms, technology, it's like it all came together. So everything I've ever done is like you were checking the boxes, right? So go and spend 10 years learning how to build a platform. Okay, check. Go and find out about, finance and mortgages for another 10 years. Check. So it all came together. But again, there are other things outside of that. Like you said, it's important to be solving a problem. It's important not just to build something for the hell of it, hoping that, if you build it, they will come. So I think it's really just a combination of all of those different experiences, added to the fact that I'm getting rather old now. So, those experiences do add up, and you can look back on them and really tap in and think, well, we've got to do it this way because we tried it that way before and it didn't work for that reason. So there's a lot of experience that you can put to use, knowing it doesn't solve all the problems, doesn't give you all the answers, but it just stops you making those basic mistakes over and over again.
For sure, for sure. And I think another, you know, strong point that you have, or great great thing that you have is how well you can communicate. Like
Thank you.
you're a
Yes.
great
This is
communicator.
this is
Like
all
you
scripted. You realise that we're just going through the script. It's taken us hours to put this together. I'm just reading this.
right, no, but I'm saying it's like the way you're breaking it down and simplifying everything. So, it makes it easy for anyone to understand and kind of follow along on what you're saying. So that's how I
It's very kind.
know that.
It has to be simple because otherwise I can't understand it. So that's that. Well, they say necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I think it's awesome too. Like it. You're saying that you always kept that childlike wonderment, and it shows because you're using this brand new technology. So you were also involved in 1998, 1999, the dot-com bubble, and now you're transitioning over to the crypto world and the blockchain and using that technology. So it's like you're definitely evolving with the times.
But also, the dot com thing. You're right. In some respects, it was a bubble, but I think it's here today. I mean,
Yeah, for
you know,
sure.
it's one of those things that it started off and no one really knew what it was going to be, but it was
Right.
damn exciting, because it
Right.
was something new and everything was building around it. Like modems became broadband, broadband became wideband, or
For
fat
sure.
pipes, and the fact that you've got 60,000 mega gigaflops to your own Wi-Fi. I mean, there was
Right.
a time when if you could get 56K, you'd throw the red flags out and celebrate. So all of that was building, and it's the same sort of thing with blockchain as well. You get faint signals from the future, and that's the thing. When you can pick those up, you think, hang on, I've been here before. This feels familiar.
Right.
And so, the blockchain is going to be as disruptive, as exciting, but in a different way to what the internet did for us.
That's awesome, and it seems like it is with most blockchain, and especially with what you're doing. It's like cutting out the middleman, and it's getting
Well,
straight to the consumer.
it is. There's a lot of that, but also the great thing about the technology is the technology itself. Um, in some respects, it's really boring to bang on about what blockchain you use because as a consumer, you don't really care. It's like if I make a phone call, I don't say, "Hey, Wes, guess what? I'm using 5G and I think I'm getting 662,000 gigawatt knots." You just think, "Well,
Right.
that's got to be the most boring conversation I've ever had." But it just works, doesn't it? So the great thing about this tech now is it sits behind the scenes, it works, and it works in a way that's scalable, robust, which means it doesn't break. People trust it because of the way it's been built, and it's a lot more cost effective to build these types of exchanges and platforms using this technology. So it's a real winner as far as we're concerned because you know it allows us to do really interesting things like create an asset that can be traded on any platform anywhere that meets regulations and that happens to be using the Algorand protocol. So as Algorand grows, then and the number of exchanges grows that use Algorand, then more and more places theoretically could trade our assets. And that's like you don't get that anywhere else. And there's this huge momentum and excitement still behind blockchain, as you can tell from the way that you sort of are excited about it. So it's lovely to be part of that wave, and not to be sort of stranded on the beach thinking, "God, what just happened?"
Right, exactly. So you're definitely making some historic moves, and there's nothing it's nothing new to you. Another thing that I'm sure is nothing new to you is being a part of a team and being a part of something kind of bigger than yourself. So, what would you say is the importance of having a good team, and how do you focus on building your team?
Well, I think it comes from this sort of realization that I'm, good at one or two things at the very most. Um, Still haven't figured out what they are yet, but you need, you need people around you because if you look carefully, most people are actually a lot smarter than you are at their thing. So you cannot be all things to all people. You cannot be um, you can't have that specific product knowledge or experience because you just need to live like 1,000 lives simultaneously to be able to do that. So the first thing is you just realize that by bringing in clever people, you're going to add to the overall thing. You're not going to create conflict or competition amongst the team, or these are all sort of stupid thoughts that people have when they worry about politics, and a lot of that comes from an office environment. But I've been working with people since I got here, and I'm still working with them today. And I get off the phone, and I think, God, you're just such a smart guy. Um, to the other people, not about me, obviously. And I just think I'm actually really pleased that we can do stuff, because together you do stuff, because these people have a different point of view. They look through life through a different lens. They see things differently. They see things you would never see in a million years. And you know, it's fine. You've got to have someone who leads, but that's not the same as someone who does everything. And anyone that tries to do everything will end up, you know, regretting it at some point. It's just a fact.
For sure. And it really is important to have those different perspectives in life, in business, really in anything that you're doing. You know, it's always wise to have multiple advisors in whatever you're doing. Um, but you know, you've been in the industry for a while. You know, you've been doing this for a while. So can you recall like any business lessons or business mistakes that you know you've encountered that you wish you could have avoided, or that you learned from, or something that you would just kind of like to pass along to the next person so they can avoid those same potholes?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great expression which is "fools leap in where angels fear to tread."
Mhm.
And I think the mistakes that I've made tend to be based on not doing enough research. So there's this sort of drive within you to get stuff done, and what you've got to do is temper that so that it's not get stuff done at any cost. It's get it done and get it done quickly and efficiently, but get it done properly. So you can race and move fast, but if you end up in a cul-de-sac for whatever reason, whether it's a regulatory cul-de-sac or a technological cul-de-sac or a literal cul-de-sac, you know, then you're going to have to turn around and go back and start rebuilding and refactoring. And anything that's got a re at the beginning means it's expensive.
For sure.
Um, so the mistakes I've made, I mean, you make some mistakes where you go, okay, fair enough, I got it wrong. You know, that's just, you know, that's what it is. But then there are mistakes that you can avoid. Um, in other words, if you work on the basis of leveraging other people's experience, um, that have been down that route, not being so headstrong that you think that you know better, which sort of follows on from your previous question. Get good advice, take time, do your research, take it step by step. Don't bet everything, you know, on your first flush. Um, then you will make fewer mistakes. You will learn more. But again, you know, mistakes, you've got to make mistakes. Otherwise, you don't learn anything. But the trick is not to end up making fatal or incredibly expensive mistakes. So I just refuse to admit the long list of mistakes I've made, because A, it'll be, you know, it's just embarrassing. But, you know, there've been a few, I can tell you.
No, that's some great advice. You know, I think that's something that everybody should hear, to slow down a little bit and kind of think out that process. Because when you get an idea, you're so excited, you'll like run through a wall to get it done or to accomplish it or to execute it. But sometimes taking that extra moment to evaluate what's going on is like the best thing to do.
Yeah, and just you figure out after a while that even though you think something is terribly, terribly urgent, actually it's not. You just
Right.
want it. You just want to do it. That's
Yeah.
the urgency. The urgency is you just want to get stuck in. But
Yeah.
that's just you. But the rest of the world doesn't care, and you'll find that out pretty quickly. So um, it's just, again, it's all about perspective. Look at it from the other side. What happens if you don't do the deal? It's like that expression. There's always another deal. Okay, if it's not the right deal, don't do it. Another deal will come along. This is not the only deal you're ever going to see in your life, so you have to
Right.
do it. You know, so
Right.
there's just take a breath and also sleep on stuff. You know, if you've got this thing going through your head and you're all confused and you think, God, okay, I'm just going to do it. Just sleep on it. Take time. Sleep on it for 2 nights, not just one night. Sleep on it for 2 nights and then think, okay, you know, take your time, because nothing really happens as fast as you want it to. And again, most people will never share the same sense of urgency that you have.
For sure. For sure. And that's awesome advice. Um, you know, so what would you say is your favorite part about being an entrepreneur and a creator?
I think it's the creative bit. Um, it's the ability to just do stuff that excites you without having to, you know, knock on your boss's door and say, look, I've got this really good idea. Can I have some resources and time to be able to investigate? You know, it's like one of those things where you go, I love this. I really want to do this. I'm going to make it happen. And I think I've sort of forgotten what it's like if you have to have those constraints. It must be, that's the worst thing, I think, about having to report to other people. I mean, and the people that you work with are probably fantastic, but just that structure, I don't think I could deal with it. I think I just love the ability to be creative. With that comes all sorts of quid pro quos. In other words, you're only as good as your last deal, and okay, if you want that sort of freedom, then you better know how to make money, because there ain't no safety net. Sure. So I think that's the best thing. Everything else is harder. You know, all this. Okay, I got free time. I took my, you know, kids swimming the other day or something, but I made up for it, because when I get back, I think, God, I've got to do all these things. You know, so it's not like I'm taking the afternoon off. You know, you get stuff done no matter what. The hours are just different. I mean, that's a small benefit, but the biggest benefit is just that freedom. It's freedom of expression. It's freedom of creativity, freedom to make your own mistakes, and freedom to enjoy your own successes.
For sure, for sure. So, what would you say is the single most important reason for your success?
I think it's. I'm just tempted to be very sort of, you know, trite and come up with something funny, but it is. I think it's just sticking at something. Because if you try something and it doesn't work, and you go, "Oh, okay, well, that didn't work. I'll try something else," you're going to be trying different stuff for the rest of your life. None of it's going to work. You just got to. I think when I was a stockbroker, my boss, who was an ex-Special Air Service, an ex-SAS captain, he just said the answer is pure dogged determination. So you just, you know, put your head down and just work and work and push and push and push until it happens. And you don't let anything get in your way. And that's difficult to do, because there's a lot of stuff that will get in your way. But you just have to have that determination. So I think it's just the combination of just what's the word? You know, when somebody describes you as very not focused, but you know, very just, you know what I mean. Where you just think, okay, I'm going to make this work. I don't care what you say. I'm going to make this work. It's going to happen. It's going to happen, and you just drive and drive and drive, you know, until it does.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, how would you like for people to remember you and your company?
Um, I think that's. Do you know? I hate that question, because that's the question I ask everyone on my podcast. You know, which is because again, you want to give this sort of, you know, I want to be remembered as the faithful servant. Well, no, I don't know actually. I just want to be remembered as not being an asshole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, yes, you know, or not being completely an asshole. I mean, you need to have some elements of being an asshole, because otherwise, you know, people will assume that you're a closet asshole. But just, you know, there was, you know, some redeeming features, some creativity, and you want to leave something behind, just something where people think, you know, for the kids as well. I think it's most important for the kids, where you think, well, okay, dad would do it that way, or, you know, this is how my dad used to do it. This is what my dad would do, something like that, but in a way that they like it, as opposed to thinking, God, I'm never going to do it like that, because that's how dad used to do it.
Right, for sure, for sure. So, what does the future of QuantmRE look like to you?
Well, I think it's pretty rosy. And the reason I say that is because we've been working on it for 4 years nearly now, and we've made lots of progress. But at the same time, the market itself has developed at the same time. So people are now more willing to look at different types of financial solutions. Houses have gone up in value, so people are motivated to try and tap into some of that and take some chips off the table. And also, the advancements in technology and the the way that blockchain can now deal with our requirements. That's very exciting. So you've got all these different things that have come together in this sort of perfect storm in a positive way. So that I think is very positive. And also, I think as a solution, it's got longevity, it's got legs. It's not going to be something that's here today, gone tomorrow. I think it's going to be another major way for homeowners to access their home equity. So they won't just have to think, is it a loan or a HELOC, or is it my rich uncle I'm going to have to borrow off? I can tap into my equity. Here's another way, and that's what's so exciting, because we really are at the beginning of something that I think is really going to change the way that homes are financed, and it's going to help out a lot of people.
Yes, sir. I certainly agree. Like, I think it's a great way to even or level out the playing field for everyone. You know what I'm saying? And give everyone a chance to um, grow their wealth or do whatever they want with
Well,
that
it
money.
just gives you freedom, because again, we see so many people that are banging their head against the wall because they just cannot solve a problem without selling their home. Their only option is to sell their home, which of course they don't want to do.
Right.
So we've actually got something where once we explain what it is, then you can hear the relief, the excitement that this is actually going to fix something for them. So there is, we're seeing that it is, we every day we speak to people where that it solves a problem, and so that is, that does fill you with energy for the next day.
For sure. Yes, sir. Matthew, thank you so much. I've enjoyed speaking with you, and I've definitely learned a lot throughout this interview. But before we go, we like to play a rapid fire question game at the end of every episode.
You didn't say anything
So
about this.
yes, sir, I threw a curveball at you. So look, if you're willing to play, I'll go ahead and ask you these three questions.
Go ahead. Yes, I'm slightly trepidatious, but all ears.
Yes, sir. So question number one: where's your favorite place to travel?
It's Utah. Actually,
Utah.
having gone on a 6,000-mile RV trip, never
Wow.
again, in June and July. Actually, no, it was great fun, and we went all the way across to the Carolinas from Utah and all the way back again. Um, I love it. I just really like it here because we're actually beginning to explore what's on our doorstep, and there's some really cool stuff here. So, having lived in Europe and traveled, right now it's what's on my doorstep. It's exciting because, it's like half an hour's drive away or a couple of hours drive away, and it's here. And again, coming back to the fact that I'm still an implant from the UK, so I've still got that sort of excitement of waking up in America every morning, despite the years that have passed. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And question number two: what song explains your life the most?
um, um, that is a tough one, actually. Um, I don't think there's any song that explains, but there are some songs that um, I Blonde's Heart of Glass is one of those songs where whenever I hear it, I immediately get transported back to, when I was a young teenager during the punk era at school in London. And for some reason, it never goes away. So there are some songs, if you play them over and over again, you lose that connection. But this just causes cold winds to brush across my temples whenever I hear it. It's just that opening riff just gets me every time. So I think it's just that rediscovering that excitement. That excitement never goes away when I listen to it. So I think it's that, whatever mood you're in, just try and find that spark. It's in there somewhere.
Yes, sir. That's awesome. That's awesome. And look, final question: what's an amazing thing that you did that no one was around to see?
Um, it's got to be to do with flying a helicopter.
Nice.
And thankfully, there was no one there to see it. No,
Yes,
it was
sir.
just, I think when I first soloed my helicopter, which, I was having this conversation years and years ago with my wife at the time, and as we were having dinner, there's like four of us, and they were saying, "Well, what was the most amazing thing?" And of course, the couple opposite said, "Well, it's when I saw the birth of my first child." And I thought, actually, no, the most amazing thing I've ever done is solo a helicopter, because of course, childbirth is fantastic, but you're kind of like a passenger. You can't. You just sit there and watch, and you're in the hands of these fantastic doctors and nurses. And it is, a wonderful thing to behold, but you're not really doing it. You're sort of watching it. So of course, I got, that dinner didn't go down very well. But I just remember taking off. I remember the examiner putting a weight in his side of the cockpit to sort of try and balance it out. And then he said, "Go on, off you go. Go and do a circuit and come back. And if you don't crash, then you can tick off your first solo." So I just remember that. There was no one there's no one saw me take off, or I think he probably wasn't looking on purpose because it was his helicopter. But just that flight, and I can still remember it today. I can still remember checking the temperatures and pressures every sort of 13 nanoseconds, and and just coming in and thinking that's it. So again, that was one of those moments that when you sort of look back, you think that was good fun. It feels like it's a different person.
Right, yes, sir. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for your time. You've definitely, lived in a very interesting and exciting life. And what you're doing in the real estate industry, and helping to create a new asset class. I mean, it just seems like you have more interesting and legendary, amazing things to go. So, I mean,
Thank
I'm
you.
really excited about it, and I'm looking forward to see, what it grows into.
Likewise, and thank you for having me on. It's been great fun.
Yes, sir. All right.